Welcome to the Health Stuff You Need to Know podcast. Information you need to thrive in our toxic modern world. I'm your host, Scott W. Kirkland. I hope you're ready because it is go time with the Wellness Whip. Yeah. Welcome to episode 1 of the Health Stuff You Need to Know podcast. Since it's the first episode, I will introduce myself and explain what the podcast is about, what it will be like, why I'm creating it, and all that kind of stuff. So let's get started. I am your host, Scott W. Kirkland, aka the Wellness Whip. Yeah. I would like to explain the Wellness Whip and the yeah. My name is Scott W. Kirkland, a pretty boring name and easy to forget. And there are other Scott W. Kirklands out there. The Wellness Whip and the yeah is a way to differentiate myself and make me more easy to remember. Even hard to forget because nobody else does it. Plus, I think it's funny and I love to have fun. And the whole point of the show is to learn and have a good time. The name of the podcast is self-explanatory. The show is literally that, health stuff that you need to know. All of us today are living in revolutionary times. We were born and raised in this time of incredible change. But because it's all that we have ever known, it is easy to forget just how radical the changes are. For most of human history, we lived as hunter-gatherer tribes and are very well adapted for that kind of lifestyle. Lots of physical activity, a pure, natural, whole foods diet of nutrient-dense foods with practically zero refined sugar. Fast forward to today, most of us don't get very much exercise, and we eat a crappy diet of low nutrient density foods with tons of refined sugar. Even if you eat a healthy whole foods diet today, you don't get the same nutrient density of wild foods because humans have hybridized the food supply so much over the millennia. That organic apple you eat has way more sugar than the wild counterpart. The organic broccoli you ate was bred to grow large for sale by the pound. The nutrient density is much lower than the wild version. Now add in all the chemicals added to the food supply, chemicals in the environment from power plants, factories, farming, nuclear radiation from meltdowns and weapons testing. Now throw in genetically modified foods, the explosion in electromagnetic radiation exposure from cell phones and Wi-Fi, and the list goes on and on. It is no surprise at all that disease rates are skyrocketing. In fact, in this toxic modern world, it is very hard to achieve optimum health, let alone maintain it into old age. I can't think of anyone I know that doesn't have some sort of health issue. In fact, I'm certain you either have or know someone with cancer or diabetes. I know your pain because I've felt it myself. We've all been touched by it. In the past, these diseases hardly existed. In this toxic modern world, the deck is stacked against us. That is the main reason I decided to create this podcast. The goal is to bring people actionable information they can use in their daily life to improve their health, their life, and live more sustainable lifestyles. I want to help people learn to adapt to this rapidly changing world so they don't get that cancer diagnosis and avoid getting diabetes or heart disease. The way I see it is that if you eat the standard American diet and live the standard American lifestyle, you're guaranteed to get the standard American diseases. I refuse to let that happen to me, and I don't want that to happen to you. It is going to be an interview-based podcast where I talk to an expert on a particular health-related subject that you need to know about. I will produce one episode a week, plan for the episodes to be roughly 30 to 40 minutes long, but if the guest is particularly good and we need to go longer, we certainly will. It's going to be totally upbeat and have good positive energy. I want it to be fun, entertaining, and highly educational. We will inevitably talk about some heavy stuff, but I promise we will end on a positive note. I'm not going to take you down in the dumps and then leave you there. The focus and goal is to give you tips to improve your life in a fun way. I'm also going to produce a once-a-week Listener's Digest style of a podcast. So I listen to a lot of podcasts, and what I'm going to do is pick 3 of my favorite and condense it down into one. So distill that valuable information into one podcast so you guys can save time and get more information faster. That's the plan. I'd like to tell you a bit about myself. I am a 42-year-old white male. I live in beautiful Souk, British Columbia, Canada, with my darling wife and my beautiful baby girl. Now I'd like to get a little more personal and tell you more about me. As you may well have guessed, I'm very passionate about health and fitness, having a podcast about it. So I've had this passion ever since I was a kid. I remember being 10 years old and going for 5-kilometer runs. I remember being in high school and I'd go for 20-kilometer bike rides, or sometimes even 40 kilometers, just for fun. And part of the reason why is I used exercise as a way to relieve stress. I grew up in a broken home. My parents got divorced when I was 5 years old. My father left, and so that left me, my mom, and my 2 sisters. So the dynamic, being the only male in a household of 3 females, was, it was challenging in its own right. And my father was a deadbeat dad. He didn't offer any financial support, and he wasn't around very much at all. He'd kind of show up once in a while and take us out for dinner, but that was about it. So I harbored a lot of anger towards him in that I felt that he abandoned me and the rest of us. And when he was around, he would tell us these pie-in-the-sky stories of how we're going to move to Africa and have a coffee plantation, and we'd have elephants and rhinos on the property, and like just crazy ass stories that are ridiculous. But being a kid, I wanted to believe him. So that kind of, when I realized that it was all crap, and I started to get angry, and so the exercise really helped with the stress of that. At this point in the podcast, I'd like to talk to you about some of my own personal health challenges that I've experienced and what I've learned from that. So I'm hoping that there's some people out there that can benefit from what I've learned. Now, probably my biggest health challenge that I've ever had to face in my life was chronic back pain. I used to get absolutely debilitating low back pain that would lay me out. At the worst time, it was actually 3 weeks. Now, it started out with my back would go out and I'd be out for a few days, 2-3 days, and then I'd be fine. But as the years went by, it seemed to get worse and worse and become more and more frequent. Now, at the end of it, it was about every 6 months I'd have an episode where I would be completely laid out. And at the last time, it was actually for as long as 3 weeks, I was laid out on a couch. Like, it was brutal. And I can tell you, it was a horrible experience. At that point, thoughts of suicide are going through your head. You just feel you're in so much pain that if this is the way life is going to be, it's not worth living. So it was definitely a very, very tough time. I went to doctors and chiropractors and osteopaths to try and help me in my healing journey. And one of the chiropractors I went to, I had x-rays performed, and I was told that I had disc degenerative disease. So what happens is your disc and your vertebra, this in my case, my lower back, lumbar area, showed signs of being compressed. And they told me that that's what was causing the pain and that it was only going to get worse. And there's really not much I could do except getting regular treatments. Now, I remember walking home from that appointment and being completely devastated. I was 32 at the time, and I was thinking to myself, like, the trajectory that I'm on, that by the time I'm 50, I'm going to be in a wheelchair. Like, it is that bad. I literally thought that I'm on my way to being a disabled person, being crippled. Thanks a lot, Doc, for the news. Luckily, it turns out that the doctor was wrong, and that is a message that I want people out there to know, that doctors are not all-knowing, and they frequently make mistakes. So if they tell you something, you don't necessarily believe it. So it always makes sense to get a second opinion and keep looking, keep striving to find a solution. So I always believe there is a solution somewhere out there, but giving up is not the answer. It's going to get you nowhere. It turns out that there's another name for disc degenerative disease. It's also known as normal aging. As we age, our discs compress, and that's totally normal. When it's called disc degenerative disease, it was very scary to me to hear that as a diagnosis. So that doctor, I felt, gave me a great disservice. So luckily for me, that doctor was wrong. And it turns out that the cause of my pain was actually psychologically based. I had a condition known as tension myoneural syndrome. And what it is the pain that I was experiencing was definitely real, but the cause of the pain was not what I thought it was. I thought that it was a physical ailment because of the x-rays that I had done and what the doctor had told me. But an interesting study was done using MRI technology and scanned a whole bunch of people's backs. And it turns out there's very little correlation between what shows up on the MRI and the pain that people experience. There were several people that had no pain, but they had all kinds of abnormalities like cracks in the vertebrae or herniated discs, like the disc was bulging right out. It didn't matter. And there were people that had excruciating pain, and they had no abnormalities. Everything looked fine. The man who coined the term tension myoneural syndrome, or TMS, was a physician named Dr. John E. Sarno. I first heard about him through my girlfriend. She had read a book that mentioned him, and she told me about it. So I went to check him out online, and I came across a clip on YouTube, and it was a segment from 2020, that old news show, with John Stossel. And it was all about Dr. Sarno. And it turns out John Stossel himself, the reporter, had excruciating back pain for years. And he found it very difficult to believe that it could be psychologically based. But he went to Dr. Sarno and went to one of his lectures, and he was cured within the first lecture. Dr. Sarno is retired now, so you can't go to his lectures, but I went to the library and got one of his books. He's got 4 books. I got the one called Healing Back Pain, read it, did the practices in the book, which were purely psychological. There's nothing physical to do. There's no exercises or anything like that at all. It's all mental. And I was cured. I haven't had a debilitating back spasm since then. It's been years and years, and it has absolutely changed my life. I went from thinking I was going to be a cripple by the time I hit my early 50s to having my life completely back and having no physical restrictions whatsoever. Dr. Sarno's TMS theory essentially is that our subconscious mind holds rage, fear, anxiety. We put pressure on ourselves to do more and be more, and the subconscious hates this. And what it does is it will create pain in the body to distract your conscious mind from the subconscious feelings that you have so they don't boil up. Now, I don't know if this is actually true or not, but I really don't care, because the results I got were absolutely life-changing. And it turns out that TMS isn't just back pain. It can be pain in other parts of the body. Apparently, fibromyalgia is commonly caused by TMS. Even things like skin rashes, like your subconscious mind can create actually a whole host of ailments in your body. So it's not just for people with back pain. It's for people with all kinds of ailments. So if you're a person that suffers from chronic pain or one of these other ailments, I highly recommend just checking it out on YouTube. Watch that video, type in Dr. Sarno, John Stossel, 2020, and it's going to pop up for you. You know, go to the library, take out his book. It doesn't have to even cost you a penny just to try it. Now, when I encounter people with chronic back pain out of my daily life and I tell them about Dr. Sarno and TMS, the first response is generally they say, oh no, it's physically based. It couldn't possibly be that. But it turns out that the subconscious mind is actually very clever, and it usually will trigger an event based after some type of physical thing. So my last blowout that I had was I was digging in a hole and pulling out a tree stump, and it set me off, and it laid me out for weeks. So the severity of the injury had nothing to do with the commensurate amount of pain. So even if you think that your pain is from an injury, I say, you know what? Take a look. Give it a try anyways. You got nothing to lose, and it just might change your life completely like it did for me. Another health challenge I've had to deal with is psoriasis. Now, for those of you who don't know what psoriasis is, it's dry, itchy, scaly skin that can occur on different parts of the body. For me, I just had it in my scalp for the type of psoriasis that I have. Effectively, it was like a bad case of dandruff, but it was itchy as well and uncomfortable. So I went to my doctor, and they told me that it was an autoimmune condition, that they're not really sure why it manifests, but it may have a genetic component. And essentially, it's parts of your immune system attack healthy cells in your body. And in this case, it happens to be skin cells. And they don't know why, in my case, particularly the scalp. Some people have it all over their body, and it's quite bad. And it can actually be lethal in some cases when it gets really, really bad. So doctors typically will give you a pharmaceutical solution, and what they normally do is offer a prescription for a corticosteroid lotion that you put on the affected area. And so I did just that, and it does work. It certainly helps relieve the scaling and cuts back on the itching and the soreness, and it does work. But unfortunately, like most pharmaceutical solutions, there are negative side effects. So long-term use or overuse of corticosteroids can lead to adrenal issues. It can affect your adrenal glands, not a good thing. And it also thins the skin. So over time, your skin will get thinner and thinner and more prone to breaking and getting infections and things of that nature. So being the kind of guy that likes to get to the root of the issue and not just take some type of drug to treat symptoms, I started doing some research and found out that in the alternative health world, there are people who believe that autoimmune conditions are actually get their root in the gut. And what happens is that when our gut wall is inflamed and not healthy, that food particles and other toxins in our food can get through and into our bloodstream, and then our immune system basically overreacts or has to deal with all this stuff that really shouldn't be there, and it can manifest in the immune system kind of going haywire and even attack healthy cells. And it turns out that gluten, which is a protein found in wheat, so bread products and pasta, it irritates the gut wall and causes this leakage of things to come across and causes autoimmune conditions. So I tried cutting out gluten, and I had dramatic positive results. I went from being dependent on corticosteroid solution to control my psoriasis to it essentially being completely gone. That now I haven't actually purchased or had my prescription filled for the psoriasis medication for years. Now I do get the occasional small flare-up because I'm not completely gluten-free. I still enjoy the occasional beer or pizza or burger, but it has made a dramatic difference cutting it out. So I recommend for anyone who suffers from psoriasis or any other autoimmune condition for that matter, that you try cutting out the gluten for a while and see what happens. See if there is an improvement. Now I know that's easier said than done. Cutting out gluten wasn't very easy for me because I was born and raised like it, like most people. It would be, toast in the morning for breakfast and a bagel or some type of cereal. And then lunchtime was always a sandwich. So, and then dinner time, you're looking at pasta or a bun or some other type of wheat product. So, it's like wheat gluten morning, noon, and night. So it certainly wasn't easy, and I'm not completely gluten-free to this day, but it's doable. I did it. Lots of other people have done it. It's worth a try. And if you see the results and you get results, then it motivates you to try even harder. So I'd say give it a shot. Another health issue I've had to deal with is postnasal drip. So what I would get would be like mucus running down the back of my throat, especially very noticeable at night when you go to bed and you're lying with your head on your pillow and you can feel this mucus kind of dripping down the back of your neck. It's disgusting. And it turns out that there was probably a couple things in my diet that really caused this issue. Too much dairy is one. Dairy affects a lot of people in that it causes overproduction of mucus. So that would be, of course, milk, cream, various cheeses. I found cutting those out or keeping them to a minimum definitely made a big difference. Another thing I found to be causing overproduction of mucus in the nasal passages was too much sugar. There is a yeast called Candida albicans, which lives in all of us, and it loves to eat sugar. So when you eat too much sugar, it creates an overgrowth of the Candida. And if they're in your nasal passages, your body will produce mucus to try and flush out that overgrowth. So I definitely find when I cut out the dairy and the sugar that the postnasal drip goes away. Now, of course, it's super easy to say, oh, I'm just going to cut out sugar and cheese and milk and yogurt and everything. And I know it's not easy to do. It's tough. It's something I still have definitely challenged with. Sugar in particular, because it's such an addictive substance. It's hard. It's hard to not have sugar in your life. We all grew up with it. We were all started on it when we were just little kids. There's no wonder we all have this addiction. I'll talk more in a bit about my struggles with food addiction, but for now, I'd like to talk about issues with maintaining a healthy weight. When I was in my 20s, I used to be able to eat whatever I want and not get fat. I'd always be lean and ripped. I could hit the buffet super hard, go back 3-4 times. I go out with friends to restaurants and I'd finish off the fries they didn't eat, and I just seemed to never get fat. But things started to change, and as I've gotten older, I'm 42 years old, and I've noticed a massive difference in the amount that I can eat and not gain weight. As we get older, our hormone levels change, and our metabolism changes, and we just can't eat the way that we did when we were younger. Now, somehow I didn't really seem to notice the creeping up in the weight until some friends gave us a picture, and I saw a picture of myself, and I had this belly, and I was like, oh, holy crap. I'm looking a little pudgy. Now, unfortunately, that fat around the midsection is the worst kind of fat. It is called visceral fat, and it is the kind of fat that collects in the spaces between your internal organs. The other kind of fat is subcutaneous, which is the stuff you can kind of pinch your belly, you pinch an inch, as they say, which is not nearly as bad. It's the visceral fat actually acts like an endocrine gland, in that it secretes substances into your bloodstream that can be quite detrimental. One of them is something called cytokines, which cause inflammation throughout your body. And if you don't know, most diseases at the base level are due to chronic inflammation. And visceral fat will also secrete advanced glycation end products, which act as radicals. So they go out into your bloodstream and do damage. It's not necessary to know all the details of what visceral fat does, but the thing that you need to know is that it is actually quite bad, and it's going to age you faster and lead you down the road to chronic disease. So it's really important to get that under control. Now, for men, they say you should have a waist measurement of 41 inches or lower, and for women, 35 inches. And it's really simple to measure yourself at home, and you take a measuring tape if you have one, or even just a piece of string, wrap it around your belly right at the navel, and it should be just above the tip of your ilium or your hip bone. And then you can just measure it against a tape measure or whatever you've got. It's this measurement that's particularly important, more important than the numbers on your scale. I'm glad to say that I have gotten rid of that excess belly weight that I had. Probably at the height, it was probably 20 pounds. Now, I'm sure you're all wondering, okay, how did you do that? How did you get rid of that 20 pounds? The primary thing I did was cutting out the carbs. I had been eating bread on a daily basis. Someone had pasta maybe a couple times a week, and I just didn't think it was that much. But I guess because I was getting older, metabolism was changing, it was too much because I'd started packing on the weight. So cutting it out made a huge difference, and I recommend anyone give it a try. I know it's not easy, but it is definitely worth it. Now, the last health challenge I'm going to talk to you guys about today is my food addictions. Now, to be honest, I feel a little embarrassed to be talking about this particular subject, but I know that I'm not the only one out there that experiences. I have no doubt about that. And hopefully my experience will help somebody overcome it like I did. I was addicted to McDonald's cheeseburgers for many years. The McDouble in particular, for those of you who are familiar with it, it's like basically it's like their basic little cheeseburger, but it has 2 patties. And I just got addicted to the salty, meaty, cheesy taste, especially after I had been drinking, say the night before, hangover food. But it wasn't just after drinking. At some points, like the amount that I would consume changed over the years, but at one point it was as much as 3 times a week. And the number, at one point I was actually consuming 5 McDoubles, 5 double cheeseburgers in one sitting. I remember one time I was with my girlfriend at the time, and we went to McDonald's, and I ordered 5 McDoubles, and she was absolutely shocked. And for me, I was like, oh, it's just my normal, it's my normal meal. Crazy. And other times it'd be a lot less, and say once a week, and I would get it down to only having 3. So it's really been a challenge for me to really cut it out. I'm happy to say that as of today, it's been over 100 days since I've had McDonald's, and I really don't like McDonald's, I guess, because it doesn't really fit with my principles and my integrity. I strongly believe that we vote with our dollars, and what we purchase, we're saying yes to. So when I was buying McDonald's, I was saying yes to genetically modified food. I'm saying yes to concentrated animal feed operations, which are highly unethical. I was saying yes to unhealthy food for myself. So bad for the planet, bad for me, not something I want to propagate. I would like to share with you the tool that I use to break the addiction, because it can be used for all kinds of addictions, actually. Now, the reason why I believe I was addicted to the cheeseburgers was because I had a strong mental pattern of associating pleasure with eating the food. I just craved the meaty, cheesy saltiness of it, the onions and pickles. And another part of the addiction, I believe, was my association with McDonald's since I was a child. Like, I grew up in a relatively impoverished family. My parents got divorced when I was 5 years old, and my father was a deadbeat dad. So we definitely struggled with money, without a doubt. And going to McDonald's was really a treat, like on somebody's birthday. And I just associated McDonald's with, a treat, good times, good taste. So I had that imprinted at a very young age. And also, I believe that when you consume it as much as I did, it starts to change your microbiome. And your microbiome, the bacteria in your gut, they can actually send signals to your brain and say, hey, give us more of this. And I think that was a big part of it, a part of the craving as well. The way I broke the pattern was by changing my association of McDonald's and pleasure to one of disgust. I did that by visualizing myself driving up to the drive-thru, making my usual order of 3 or 4 McDoubles, and at the end there I was actually ordering a large French fries, and I have a pop too, so that would make things even worse. Like, deep fried food is really, really bad for you. The oxidized fats, that's what really is a major cause of heart disease. and arteriosclerosis in our society today. And so I would visualize making the purchase, opening the bag, putting it in my mouth, and then I would literally make myself sick. I would think of myself vomiting all over myself. I would make it so real. I would bring up the gag reflex. I'd be like, I was mentally imprinting, instead of pleasure, to vomit with McDonald's food. So every time I had the craving, I would do this, and I would try and make it as real and sense it as much as possible in my visualizations every time I had a craving. And my cravings started to go away. Now, I have a McDonald's in the core of the town I live in, and so I drive by it all the time. So sometimes I still just revisualize or do a quick just to reinforce. But at the point now where I don't really crave it at all anymore, and I've basically gotten it out of my system. My microbiome's changed, and I've beaten it. So I recommend to anyone that has an addiction that they want to beat, you know what? You can give this technique a try. No guarantee that'll work, but it's free and it's very simple. And why not just give it a shot and see what happens? You just might break that addiction. Okay, we're going to change gears now. And I'm going to tell you about some of my health philosophies and practices. And really the core of the stuff I think you need to know to thrive in our toxic modern world. So here we go. I believe that diet really is the key piece. If we can get that dialed in, it gives us a real leg up to help deal with all our modern toxins and stressors. The truth is that we are a highly adaptable organism, and we can adapt and thrive to these changes. But what we really need to focus on is nutrient-dense food to give our bodies what we need to overcome, and foods that aid our detox systems, because that's a big difference today that we have. We have way more toxicity than existed naturally. Plus, our conventional food system is highly nutrient deficient compared to a wild diet. In a nutshell, I recommend a whole foods diet that is no processed foods, because processed foods generally contain chemicals, colors, additives. The packaging they come in can leak chemicals into the food itself, so it's just best to avoid processed food. Stick with whole food, primarily plant-based, so you eat more plants than anything else. This way you'll get good levels of fiber, absolutely essential for good health, for detox, and the antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, enzymes that you need. I definitely recommend low carb. That's what I do. It's made a huge difference for weight management. Gluten-free, really keep your pastas to a minimum, maybe once a week or twice a week, and bread as well. Hardly eat it at all. And when you do, make sure it's gluten-free. Keeping refined sugars to an absolute minimum is key, absolutely. I firmly believe that the overconsumption of sugar is one of the main primary drivers of disease in our society today. It's the primary culprit for heart disease, diabetes, obviously, cancer. I used to think that, if I had like one soda pop or I had a donut or, something once a day, I thought, it's not that much, but it is. So I'm definitely down to the point where it's, once a week at the most, I'll have some kind of a sweet treat. I'm also a big proponent of organic, because you're going to get less pesticide residue on your food, so less toxicity for your body to deal with. You're also going to avoid genetically modified foods, which I am very much against. I saw a study, it was a French one, where they fed rats GMO food, and they got an incredible amount of tumors. And you can see the pictures. You go online, type in GMO rat tumor study, and it'll shock you. It shocked me. And there's a lot of other independent studies as well have shown that there's infertility issues. There's a whole gamut of things that GMOs can do to you. So avoid GMOs. Organic is a way to do that. Another thing I like about organic is that when you buy it, you're essentially saying that you do not support the dumping of millions and millions of pounds of chemicals in the environment year after year. I believe that one of the major causes of the cancer epidemic is the sheer volume of chemicals that are dumped into our environment. There's literally billions and billions of pounds dumped in every single year. The factories are making it right now, and all this toxicity is adding up. And the amount of people that are getting cancer, my grandfather passed away from cancer, and I currently have 2 family members that have cancer. I have friends that have died, people that I know that have cancer. Like, it is ridiculous. I'm pissed off. This is unacceptable. And for me, I'm going to vote with my dollars, and I'm going to buy organic because I don't want to participate in the destruction of this planet. Now, that being said, organic isn't always an option. Sometimes it's just not there. So I will use the environmentalworkinggroup.org, that's EWG.org, has a list. So they have the Dirty Dozen, and that is the top 12 produce items that use the most chemicals in their production. And they also have the Clean 15 list, which has the top 15 ones that use the least amount of pesticides. So when there's a Dirty Dozen item that I can't get organic, then I just won't buy it at all. So I won't buy apples, pears, peaches, nectarines, spinach, potatoes, peppers. There's a few others. And if it's not there, I just go without. Another reason I like organic is because the food is more nutrient dense than conventionally farmed foods. Because what happens over time with conventional is that the soil gets depleted, it gets used up of its minerals, and what the farmers add is NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The soil eventually kind of becomes a sponge for chemicals, and all the natural soil microorganisms die off. So when you're buying organic, you're saying yes to saving our soil. And when you're buying conventional, you're saying, you know what, screw the future. I really don't care. We'll just trash the place. I also practice in advocating eating a vegetable dominated diet. That is, I eat more vegetables than anything else. And there's some good reasons to do that. One of them is the health reasons, because with vegetables, you're going to get so many of the antioxidants, vitamins, and minerals, and other nutrients that you need to stay healthy and supply your body with materials for the detox that you need to handle all the chemicals that we're exposed to. Unfortunately, what happens when you eat animal products is that toxins get bioaccumulated. That is, they build up in the animal. So if you eat a animal heavy diet, you're looking at getting much more toxicity than you would get if you ate a heavily plant-based diet. Now, for the record, I am an omnivore. That is, I eat plants and animals. I did try being a vegan at one point. I was primarily motivated for environmental reasons. That is, being a vegan has less environmental impact than does being an omnivore. But I found that my body really didn't like it. I started to get fainting spells and dizziness when I would sit up. And so that's when I knew that obviously what I was doing wasn't working for me. Which brings me to another point that I advocate, is that we honor our genetic heritage when we are choosing our diets. For example, if you were born and raised in India and your genetic heritage is Indian, then, which is a primarily vegetarian diet, then it makes sense to pursue that because you have adapted to that diet. It wouldn't make sense for an Indian person to suddenly start eating like a North American. And unfortunately, that is happening a lot in India. And when they do, they're getting the classic North American diseases. Surprise, surprise. The bottom line is that we're all unique individuals, and we have to find out what works for us. I believe that looking at your genetic heritage and trying to eat traditionally is the best way to go. And now there's a lot of people that are mixed lineages. So I believe a mixed diet of the 2 or 3 or whatever it is that you are is worth trying. In my mind, there is no one size fits all. You have to experiment and figure out what is the best for you. And interesting, with genomic research, they're working on fine-tuning your diet based on your genes. So that's very exciting. Looking forward to seeing how that progresses in the future and using that as a tool. Could be very useful for us mixed breeds. I am personally very wary of people that promote a one-size-fits-all. There are people that say that vegetarianism is the way and every person on the planet, all 7 billion of us, should eat that way. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous. It's much, much more complicated than that. When I do eat animal products, I recommend eating organic and grass-fed. I choose organic because I want to avoid the built-up pesticides that are going to be in an animal that's been eating pesticide-laden feed, and also avoid an animal that's been eating genetically modified feeds, because I just don't want to take that risk, don't want to take that gamble. Another great thing that you get to avoid when you go organic is the antibiotics, because in concentrated animal feeding operations, modern industrial style feedlots, the animals are very much crowded together. Diseases spread very easily, and so there's a lot of use of antibiotics, which, of course, you're going to get some of that residue when you eat the meat. So not good for your microbiome, not good for you. And another interesting fact about antibiotics is that they can actually be used to fatten up animals before they go to slaughter, which is interesting. For me, and most people are trying to keep weight at a proper level. You don't need any extra antibiotics that may cause you to gain weight. Like, just not a good thing. Another important part of the organics is that the animals are generally treated better than they are in a standard industrial style feedlot situation. So it's a lot more ethical. The reason I choose grass-fed is because modern agriculture has induced an imbalance that shouldn't really exist at all, but it does now. So normally a cow would eat grass. That's what they evolved and adapted to eat. But now they're fed grain. And this changes the nutrient profile of their diet and then changes the meat of the animal itself. And unfortunately, it impacts us in a negative way. The issue is the omega-3 fats ratio to the omega-6 fats. But because we've switched from animals eating grass, like they naturally would, to grain, those ratios are way out of whack. And the reason it's an issue for us is that in our bodies, we have a system that is finely balanced between inflammation and non-inflammation. So when we have an injury or an infection, the body initiates an inflammation response and it speeds up the healing, and it's all fine and dandy. That's the way it's supposed to be. When we think about omega-3 versus omega-6, a car analogy is actually pretty useful. Think of the omega-3 as the brake pedal and the omega-6 as the gas pedal when it comes to inflammation. Both are absolutely necessary to the system, but there's a fine balance between the two. Now the vast majority of us are getting way too much omega-6, so that gas pedal for inflammation is getting pushed a lot. So it's increasing systemic overall inflation in our bodies, which can lead to all kinds of health conditions. And that's why it's really important to choose grass-fed. It's also really important to avoid polyunsaturated vegetable oils like soybean oil, canola oil, safflower oil, because these are really high in omega-6. And with our diets today, we're getting, that's another huge source that we need to eliminate. Now I'd like to talk a bit about the supplements that I take and why. Now, some people don't think that you need supplements and that you get enough nutrients from the food that you eat. And it's the famous thing is they say it's expensive urine because those vitamins are just getting excreted out to your urinary tract. Now, I completely disagree with that statement. I believe that in our toxic modern world, where we have so many changes and so many extra stressors to deal with, that if you want to achieve optimal health or even just stay healthy, you really have to be proactive. And taking supplements really is a great way to be proactive. One of the supplements I take on a regular basis is a high-quality fish oil. The reason why is that fish oils are high in omega-3 essential fatty acids. Those are great for you for a number of reasons, but the main reason I take it is to balance out my ratios from omega-3 to omega-6 to get them back more where they should be. So on the day-to-day basis, I eat a really clean, healthy diet. But for example, if I buy an organic chicken, it's most likely to be a grain-fed chicken, which is going to be high in those inflammation-inducing omega-6s. So I take the fish oil to help balance that out. There's a few things I'm looking for when I buy my fish oil. One is the issue of toxicity. I've talked about before about bioaccumulation of toxins that happens in the food chain, and the ocean is no different than that. There's all kinds of toxins being dumped into the oceans every single day. It's absolutely disgusting. So I like to consume oil that is of a smaller fish, because the small fish is going to have less time to accumulate toxins than, say, a large fish like a tuna. So the fish oil I consume is actually made of anchovies and sardines, very small and young fish that had a very limited amount of time to accumulate toxins. I'm also looking for oil that is molecularly distilled, which will remove even more toxins, which is great. Another issue is sustainability. I am concerned about our planet, and so it should be something that has some type of sustainable harvesting designation. Another major concern for me when I'm purchasing a fish oil is that it's not rancid. Now, unfortunately, a lot of the fish oils out on the market today actually are rancid. And that's very bad, because those oils, those oxidized oils, can actually cause the diseases that you're trying to prevent from taking fish oil, like heart disease. So the question is, how do I know if the fish oil I'm buying is rancid or not? If you're hardcore, you can take it to a lab and get it analyzed. Another way is to basically smell it. If it smells that has a strong fishy odor or a strong fishy taste, that's a sign that it's gone rancid. Now, some companies will actually add deodorizers and do other treatments to get rid of that smell and taste, which is unfortunate. But another indicator is when you actually consume it, and if you get a big fishy burp, that is a definite sign that you're consuming rancid fish oil. And if that happens to you, toss it out, because when you eat a piece of real fish for dinner, it doesn't come back and burp on you. So I'm going to move on now and talk about the multivitamin supplement I like to take. It's made by a brand called Megafood, which is available throughout Canada and the United States. What makes it stand out is that it's actually made out of real food. The vast majority of vitamins on the store shelf are actually synthetically produced. A lot of them are created using coal tar and processed with chemicals such as acetone, formaldehyde, things that I really don't want to be putting in my body. The molecules that are synthetically created certainly do resemble the natural food-based vitamins that we're looking for, but they're not exactly the same. So a lot of them are not nearly as bioavailable. That is, our bodies can't uptake them like they can a natural food-based vitamin. Now, back before I understood the difference between food-based vitamins and synthetic, I used to take a synthetic multi, and I'd noticed that my urine was quite yellow. And there's that old saying that, taking vitamins is a waste of time. It's just expensive urine. And I think there actually is a lot of truth to that when we're talking about synthetic vitamins. But what I've noticed when I take my natural food-based vitamin, that doesn't happen at all. So that's telling me that instead of the synthetics, just being excreted by the body, basically being pissed out like a toxin, I'm actually absorbing the nutrients from my food-based vitamin. Now, another issue with synthetic vitamins is just the reductionist thinking that goes into them. The idea that you can just take one compound and isolate it and take a whole bunch of it and it's going to be good for the body. I don't believe that. In our food, there's so many other chemicals and nutrients and things that we really don't understand. And a lot of these substances have synergistic relationships. So if you take some of this, you got to have some of that to balance it out, or this mineral. And you get that in food. But when you do that with synthetics, you don't get that balance. Some people question whether it even makes sense at all to take a multivitamin. They think that they get all the nutrients they need from the food that they're eating. Now, that may have been true a couple hundred years ago, but it's my belief that things have changed so much and we're exposed to so many more stressors, and our food supply has been altered so dramatically that just isn't true anymore if you want optimal health. Like I mentioned before, take organic broccoli, for example. It's been hybridized. It's been altered by man so that it will grow bigger so they can sell more, so they can make more money. It's not grown to be nutrient dense like the wild counterpart. I believe taking a food-based multi is going to make up for those deficiencies in our food supply. And also the fact is, in our toxic modern world, we have way more stressors, we have way more toxins to deal with, so it just makes sense to have more nutrients to help your body repair itself and eliminate toxins. Another category of supplement I like to take are green food powders, which I like to add to my smoothies. I think they're a great, easy, convenient way to boost nutrient density and nutrients that are going to help me detox, which is so important. Now I'd like to shift gears and tell you the reasons why I am making the podcast in the first place. The main reason is that I can really see a need for it. I remember one time I had an epiphany. I was in the parking lot of a Safeway walking in. I was looking around and I saw all these people that were overweight with really bad skin, hobbling around, obvious joint pain, inflammation in their bodies. And I thought, what the hell is going on? This is crazy. It's become normal, and that's what most people experience today, but it's not normal human condition. We're meant to be healthy and happy. I remember traveling in Laos in the backcountry, and I never saw people no one was overweight, certainly not children. And the kids were healthy and happy, and it was just a whole different level of health. Things have really gone awry here in the West. When I'm standing in line at the grocery store checkout and I can see what other people are buying in front of me, and I see all kinds of people, white bread and buying pop and bakery goods and all kinds of crap. And it really is a prescription for disease. You can tell these people's future based on what they're putting in their bodies today. It's not really surprising to me at all, the state of affairs, considering what we're up against. Like, it's hard to be healthy today in the Western world. We have food scientists working around the clock, 24/7, chemists, that their job is to find a way to take cheap, crappy food, make it taste good, get you to buy it. There's also psychologists figuring out ways to manipulate you to buy it. They're directly marketing to children, so they're starting us very young, getting us addicted. There's no wonder it's hard to be healthy in the world today, considering all the stuff that is stacked against us. So in my mind, I see a definite need for a podcast. There's other podcasts, and I'm sure you listen to other ones as well, but we need more voices, different styles to reach more people, to get the word out. I'm also very passionate about sustainable civilization. The road that I see humanity on is not a good one. We need to make a lot of changes, and I want to be a part of that. And so for me, living healthy, really, what's good for your health is also good for the planet. They're one and the same. So I'm hoping to inspire people to live healthier, eat healthier, and live more sustainable lives. I've been interested in sustainability for quite some time, but now I've got a baby girl and I'm even more passionate about doing something. Don't want to see this world destroyed before her eyes. And for me, it's actually quite scary. I have a family member that was just diagnosed with thyroid cancer, and she'll be having her thyroid gland removed. My thoughts turned to my little girl. Like, the cancer rate used to be like 1 in 10,000. Now it's like 1 out of 2 or 1 out of 3 in your lifetime. It's like, and it's accelerating. So by the time she is my age, like, what's the cancer rate going to be? 1 out of 1? Another reason that I want to do the podcast is that I'm hoping my family members will listen and maybe make some positive changes in their lives. Because, in my family, we have people who are overweight, diabetes, arthritis, cancer, probably just like your family. We really don't get together often enough, and I don't want to be the guy harping on healthy lifestyle. Like, that's not what I'm going to do. So I'm hoping that they listen and maybe make some positive changes. Another reason I'm doing the podcast is that I'm hoping to get a sense of fulfillment from it. Now, I'm a very lucky man in a lot of respects. I'm healthy and happy, I have a very comfortable life, but I'm not really that fulfilled. So I'm hoping the podcast will be a vehicle to touch, hopefully, thousands and thousands of lives in a positive way, because I really do want to make the world a better place for me being in it. And I know other podcasters get emails back from people saying how this particular episode, information changed our life. And I'm looking forward to that. I'm hoping that happens to me. I'm hoping that I really help people change their lives and they get back to me and say, hey, thanks, buddy. And so if I change your life, be sure to drop me an email. And the last reason I'll share today why I'm doing the podcast is I'm thinking it's going to help me make more positive, healthy lifestyle choices because I get it. It is tough to be healthy out there, and I'm tempted constantly by I go to the grocery store, ice cream and chocolate and chips and pop and restaurant food, you name it. I'm constantly being tested. And I think by having the podcast and having an audience, it's going to inspire me to be even more diligent in making healthy choices. And I have a little girl now, and, I want to be healthy so I can perform my best for her, to be the very best dad that I can be. And the reality is that I'm no spring chicken. I'm 42, middle-aged, having a baby. It's going to take a little bit of extra work to stay healthy. And the older we get, the reality is the more important it is to live a healthy lifestyle if you want to have that optimum health, which I certainly do, and I hope you do too. We have reached the end of this episode. I hope you have found a piece of information you can use to improve your life or the life of your loved ones with. If you feel that I've helped you in some way, I ask that you help me in return. Liking, rating, reviewing, sharing, and or subscribing all help me rise in the search engine rankings so I can reach and help even more people. Subscribing being the most important one. Thanks in advance. As always, I will continue to bring you the health stuff you need to know.